this is a follow-up to last year. Who here saw Konstantin's talk last year? Anyone? Yeah? I had no idea. Okay. Well, some slides will be repeat for you, but not all of them. And it's kind of, it's annoying that this event is so inspiring and so good because I don't want to go through this talk. I would rather talk about the other talks from today, like the definition of open source and the needs of data. But here we are. We'll talk about the Open Source Endowment. And what we're doing is I would call it active research to kind of solve a lot of the challenges that have been talked about already this past couple days. So what is the impact of open source? How can we identify the critically underfunded projects? And then how can we give the open source community itself the agency to support the development and maintenance of those projects and the community around them? So we started this in February. Last year's event was around the same time, October and November, so we took a couple months. We put all the paperwork together. We incorporated. We are still technically not a nonprofit in the US, but we have the paperwork filed, and the US moves slow, particularly over the past couple months where maybe it wasn't moving at all. And once that gets sorted out, we'll have a much larger movement and event to really get things going. But we have had some success over the past couple months, so I look forward to sharing that with you. So let's move forward and matching colors because red, why not? All right, so who am I? I have spent a lot of time in the open source ecosystem. I've been here for probably 15, almost 20 years. I have worked with NumFocus, which is a foundation that does wonderful work with the research software stack. NumPy, SciPy, Matplotlib, they're a fiscal sponsor. If you haven't checked them out, numfocus.org, give them a look. I have also started two other organizations. One's called SciOS, Scientific Coordination Infrastructure and Operating Systems Collaborative, and the other called IOSP, the Institution of Open Science Practices. SciOS does workshop facilitation. IOSP does let's say, technology advancement and facilitation and coordination. We're doing an interesting workshop. We just launched it today. Go to mira.science if you want to check that out. That's going to be on modular interoperable research attribution, I believe. So we're trying to figure out how to give credit to all researchers throughout the process of research, not just the PIs and whatnot. And then for IOSP, you can go to opensciencepractices.institute. But today, we're here for the Open Source Endowment, where I'm the volunteer executive director, just helping getting this thing off the ground and figuring out how we're going to implement a lot of the great visions that Konstantin shared last year. This over here is just to showcase that I spent some time for this presentation putting together like a sandbox to play with 2347. This is XKCD 2347, the one Nebraskan developers down there, and it's actually an interactive thing, and you can click on it and it like blows up. It's a lot of fun. I'm thinking of turning it into a game. Would anyone play that game? It's like, yeah, just like save open source with the stack. What is that, hand wavy? And then squirrels. So because I couldn't bring that actual interactive environment, I'm recycling a couple slides. It's a different narrative, but the slides are from an old presentation, and the squirrels are because at the time that I put this together, I had just learned that squirrels do not recover more than half of the nuts that they bury. And when you think about that, they are basically planting the seeds for their continued survival years and years ahead. That little nut that they don't find turns into a tree, and 20 years later, it is sustaining them. So one could think that squirrels are the world's first endowment managers, which I find very cute. All right, this is just more of that little game thing. Yeah, and then it falls. Lots of fun. Okay. So a lot of this has already been said, so I'll go very quickly over the next couple slides. But the state of the economics of open source is why we're doing the endowment. So when we look at it, these numbers are all familiar, I think. Yes. So a lot of money comes into open source, depends on a lot of economic activity depends on open source. Everyone uses it. We all know this already, so I'll move on very quickly. There's the 2D version of 2347. There is a lot of open source that is in dire straits that needs support drastically. So moving quickly through this again, there are increasing number of security threats and security vulnerabilities that have been exploited over the past decade. There's a couple big ones up on here, but again, we already all know this, so I will move quickly again. And then this is where I'll pause for a second to talk about the current funding solutions. So what the endowment is doing is not trying to replace anything. It's not saying one of these solutions is bad or better. It's not saying what we're doing is better. It's simply saying there are not enough funding streams into open source. We need more on top of this. So currently we have the corporate model. I'm sure we're mostly all familiar with that. Corporations that use open source will sometimes support the development of that open source they use. They are also sponsors of events like this and other community events that help bring developers and advocates together. There's the foundation model. The foundation model doesn't bring money into open source. They actually need money to run, but what they do is support the social fabric that open source depends on. So they run events like this. NumFocus runs all of PyData. It's a fantastic branch of open source for scientific Python, and there's a bunch of others in the ecosystem that do fantastic work for that social fabric. There are the FOSS funds. So Spotify, you've got things like Century that are doing the open source pledge, which are fantastic. They're still dependent on corporate funding. And the issue with corporate funding really is that it's dependent on their bottom line. What are they doing, their priorities for this quarter, and how much money are they making this quarter? Do they have the disposable income to support open source projects? And then you have the commons, the crowdsource, the thanks.dev, the open collective, those sorts of things that raise small dollar donations from people who support and love open source and the software that they use. And then very excitingly, governments are starting to get involved. So states are fantastic. Open source is a common good. It should be funded by states. It seems very obvious to us, but it's taken a lot of work from organizations like these and some other folks who to make that the case, and it's still not the case, but it's starting to happen. That said, we've got these gaps in the system that we see. There is no truly sustainable funding. All of these, even the state funding, is dependent on who's in charge at the time and what the priorities are at the time. We're going through this in the political system right now where there's a lot of shakeups. If we were funding open source right now, let's say we've been funding it for the past 10 years, I don't know if we would continue funding it for the next 10 years, right? It's not sustainable, it's not guaranteed. We need a systemic approach. The corporate funding model is a great example of a non-systemic approach where they are looking at the tools they use at kind of the application level and will support those. They don't go deep down the stack to find the core dependencies on which they depend. For example, in NumFocus, there's NumPy, which is critical to a lot of software. NumPy depends on things. It's not just software that exists. It depends on something like BLAS or GCC. Those things are not easily identifiable, and so they're not supported as much. So that systemic approach would find that long tail of software that is absolutely critical to the more application layer software. And then we need something that's more high efficiency and scalable. This is sort of starting to get solved by the grassroots funding models where we can get thousands or hundreds of thousands of people donating $10 and it going directly to where it needs to go. So maybe less of a gap with number 3, but 1 and 2 definitely still exist. So to summarize the economic state, open source is a common good. It underpins long-term economic growth, as we saw with all those numbers, and it empowers stability and interoperability. Can you imagine if every proprietary company, if every company had to create new proprietary software for everything they had to do, all the way down the stack? It would be a really weird world in which we live, where we recreate NumPy, for example, 10, 20 times in each company. So maybe a philosophical statement here, based in fact. Open source is an economic powerhouse responsible for over 2.2% of global GDP. That's a huge number, and I think we should appreciate that, and we should share it more. I forget who was talking earlier about using numbers to tell their stories. We have to use these numbers to tell the story. 2.2% of global GDP is a lot of money. Tell this to the politicians. Now, the culture. So open source is not just an economic powerhouse. There's more to open source than money and software. We are a community. So what's the state of this culture? We've got 150 million GitHub developers, 420 projects across 7 continents. I'm taking a leap here and saying that someone on Antarctica is using open source software in some of those research facilities. And then what's really crazy is there's a lot of onboarding outside of the countries that currently use open source and have a huge developer base. India is a great example of this. The number of developers entering the developer community in India is exponential, essentially, and they are not being onboarded by universities. They are not being onboarded by training necessarily. They're being onboarded by open source, just finding a repo and contributing to it. So we've got that stat over there kind of highlighting that. There's a survey link that you can't see down there where there was a survey on a platform of developers, and there's a lot of really interesting data in there. I'd recommend you go check it out. I think you might be able to get the slides later. But open source, ultimately, when it comes to a cultural entity, is a almost frictionless pathway into software development. You can learn how to code. You can learn how to be a community manager. You can learn how to be a product manager. You can learn how to communicate. You can learn how to build slides. You can learn how to do 3D images of XKCD. You can do anything with open source, and people are doing everything with open source. So when we think about open source, these are the things that we do as a community. We create, we meet, collaborate, befriend, build, employ, educate, mentor, support, and generate. More than just IP, we generate a lot of things. And I am curious, has anyone met a spouse from an open source community here? One day someone will raise their hand. But everyone, usually I ask if you've met a friend or a colleague or a coworker, and everyone yeah, people have met some folks. Yeah, maybe. I'll take it. All right, so I have found one partner has been found in the open source community. Doesn't what? Yes. Well, so it is everything that a university, that a global institution is. When we think about going to university, we go there to learn, but we go there to meet our friends for the rest of our life. We go there to meet people to start businesses with. We go there to do more than just educate. We are the largest, most accessible, and most impactful 21st century institution. We are built for the digital age. And we're the only institution so far that's been built for the digital age from the ground up because we created the digital age in the first place. And I think we as a community need to appreciate that. We need to respect ourselves for our economic output and our cultural output. We are very, very important. So every institution has an endowment. So that's what we created. We're using a new solution in open source. So very quickly, I will go through what an endowment is. Does anyone know what beerware is? I love telling people what beerware is. So beerware is a fun open source license by this gentleman, Paul Henning-Kemp, who basically said, if you use this and you think it's useful and you find me in real life, buy me a beer or don't. It's a really funny license. Google it. It's fantastic. So I was going to put a picture of myself up here, but that would be lame. So this is a picture of my dog. She's Coda. Let's say Coda uses Paul's software and wants to buy Paul a beer. That's fantastic. Coda should do that. Coda does do that. Paul is happy. But there are squirrels. We have to remember the endowment managers. So Coda can buy Paul a beer. Paul will still be happy. But there's a squirrel that maybe Coda gives a beer to, and this squirrel buries that beer, we'll call it principal at this point, buries it in a brewery. And that brewery uses that beer to create more beer and then gives that beer that it's created back to the squirrel as a form of a return. So the squirrel now has a principal and a return, and the brewery keeps making more beer with that original principal and keeps giving that new beer back to the squirrel, who trickles that beer to Paul, who is happy. Now, Acadia, my other dog, she's an idiot, also wants to help Paul. So she gives the squirrel another beer. So that principle grows. So now the brewery has more beer with which to generate more beer. And so the squirrel now has more returns to continuously trickle to Paul. And the brewery, the sustainability aspect of this is that the brewery is going to continuously trickle beer to the squirrel over time. So the squirrel can continuously trickle beer to Paul over time, and Paul will continuously be happy over time. And that makes Coda happy. So that is the basic principle of an endowment told with beer. So why is this important? Well, an endowment has existed for hundreds of years. They're all over the place. Many institutions have them. What's very interesting to us is this element over here. How do we choose where money goes to from the returns? With a typical endowment, you're going to have a board of managers, essentially, that make that decision. A group of individuals in a locked room, usually, that make decisions that some of the people that give to the endowment agree with, other people don't agree with, but it's limited to a small group of people, whatever the case. So the questions we're asking are, how do we give that to the community? That distribution power to the community while also making it systemic. So here are the core questions. How do we find that critically underfunded software? So we have to find software that is critical and software that is critically underfunded. And then how do we select who gets how much? And how do we improve this model over time? So the way we're thinking about this is through an algorithm. And I'll show you what that might look like in just a second. But if we can use metrics like downloads, and don't shoot me for using downloads, it's just the easiest one for everyone to understand. Something like downloads to measure usage. And we can measure, let's say, health based on number of contributors. Then we can identify something that's used a lot and something that is at risk because only one person's building it. There's much more to that, but that's the basic principle. And we believe this is the way to go because, again, open source is incredibly important. Economically and culturally, we need to exist, and we need to control our own destiny. There's the other funding models are fantastic, but if we continue to just depend on those corporations and governments for money, then we will not be able to make as many decisions for ourselves because we will always be beholden to who's giving us the money. So here's another picture of that soon-to-be game that you can go play. I can't decide if I want to make it like a Flash game or actually put it on Steam. We'll see. So the tower will fall down. Okay, so what I've been building over the past couple months, largely with AI, so please appreciate the AI visuals, is a way to measure all this stuff. This is a system that does work. I'm starting to open it up to users. If you want to get onto it, I can give you access. There are a lot of things that are broken with it, but we have we've developed a way to identify the core dependencies of software by scraping binaries, building symbol mappings, and then just identifying what that software is. So you put in something like NumPy, and you come back with GCC and BLAS. Then so that's coming from sources like ecosystems, which was brought up earlier, GitHub, GitLab, all the sort of software repositories that exist. And then we can tie that, of particular relevance here, to something called OpenAlex. Who does not know what OpenAlex is? Go to openalex.org. It's fantastic. Okay, you will love it. It is a giant repository of research, and it's a knowledge graph. It has authors, institutions, all that stuff. So a lot of really, really good data related to publications. So if a publication cites a piece of software, we can consider that a use, and we can build an entire map from that paper up through patents, up through institutional use, up to national use, because a lot of times institutions are very closely tied to nations. And we can build some of the things that were requested just a couple talks ago before lunch. And we've built it, and it works. And so you can see if this project, GCC, crashes, we'll lose 326 repositories and 44 I think publications will be impacted, and this is with I ingested maybe like 100 repositories there. So this is kind of what that portfolio would look like if you were to come with your institutional repositories. Repositories you know are related to your institution. You would put them through the system, and you'd get back the number of research papers that are using your software, as well as a bunch of other data. This is dummy data for NumFocus, so do not take this. NumFocus is much more impactful than this. Scrolling through, oh gosh. So what OpenAlex does, they've used an LLM to classify research into domains. They have a hierarchy, so it goes domains, fields, subfields, topics. So you can classify what domains are using what software and get as granular as you want. You can then, through that, find the institutional use, what institutions are using your software, and how. And you can start to build a lot of really fun maps. There's another element of this called software mentions, where most papers do not cite software in the first place. Most software does not have a DOI. So how do you identify the software that is being used in research? Well, you scrape it for mentions of software. You infer how that software is used in that paper. Is it mentioned because it's bad software? Is it mentioned because it's critical? Is it mentioned because it was developed by that paper? And there are 3 data sets so far that have done this: SoftCite, the CZI data set, and something called Software KG. So this tool will cross-reference your software with those data sets, see if the software in your portfolio is mentioned in those data sets. This needs work. There are people working on expanding this and making it better. So if you're looking for something to do, I can put you in touch with the folks who are building this to make it more production ready, more productionable, more operational, I should say. And then what we can do is map contributors. So there's 5 different ways to map contributors. I'm going to start going a little more quick here. but you can start to see who's contributing to what software with other contributors. You can start to see how impactful these people are, and then you can also run impact algorithms on all of this. So the idea of the model is that we're going to create the first one, and then it's going to evolve over time. We do not expect one model to be the solution. We don't want one algorithm to tell us what is impactful, because of a couple reasons, not the least of which is that once you know what the algorithm is, you can game it. So we don't want to let people game it. We want to continuously develop this thing over time. And so this is what that might look like. These are seven different ways to measure the impact of software. And there should be probably 20,000 of these. Everyone has their own measure of impact, and we need to give people the tools to apply those to any software that they want. And then this is for papers, not incredibly relevant right now. And this is it. I believe there might be one more. Nope. Yeah, so get in touch if any of this interests you. There's a lot more depth to go into, and I'm happy, particularly with the software mentions, if you want to help these folks build that tool, they would love that help. So thank you.